kick off this series, we are fortunate to have Julie Wexler. Say hi, Julie.
Hello, everyone.
Julie is the Director of Business Development at the Bristal Assisted Living and has spent her 25-plus-year career in a variety of elder care settings, including community-based senior services and government agencies, and for the last 8 years in the senior living industry. Her experiences inspire her to develop and support programs that improve the quality of life for all older adults. Julie is an invited speaker on various topics related to aging, Alzheimer's and dementia care, caregiving for older adults, and of course, understanding different elder care resources. But most importantly, Julie believes that all seniors, regardless of cognitive or physical decline, deserve to live a full, active, supportive, meaningful, and purposeful life. So again, we're grateful to have you, Julie. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. This is always a pleasure to have any kind of conversation with you. So I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you, Julie. So before we kind of get started, take a moment and share a little bit about yourself that would be helpful for the audience to understand who you are or why you do what you do.
So I have spent, as you mentioned before, 25 years working in senior services.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it might be cliche, but I really attribute that to the amazing relationship that I had with my own grandparents. I was very fortunate to have all four of my grandparents way into my adult life.
Mm.
And I just always loved hearing them tell stories about what life was like when they were growing up, or what things were like when they were young adults. And that really just always stayed with me. And, you know, whether I've worked for nonprofit groups or government agencies and now in senior living, you know, those same themes kind of come out over and over again, that regardless of our age, regardless of cognitive decline or physical decline, everyone deserves to live a great life, regardless of age. And sometimes you just need those extra supports to help you do that. And families need the information in order to access those supports. You know, the generation, Brian, that you and I deal with every day, that sandwich generation, you know, we're the first generation in the history of humanity to have to deal with parents who are living as long as they are. Right? Yeah. When you think about that, you know, what the life expectancy is now compared to even what it was 25 years ago, not to mention 50 years ago. So this is a whole new world for our society. So I'm glad that we're doing this conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to give some good information to families to navigate.
Great, thank you. I just stopped screen sharing here so that people can actually see our faces a little better. So there's a reason I like you, Julie, and that's because I have the same motivations, the same reasoning as to why we do what we do. I mean, we're connected that way, in that it was my grandparents that got me into this. You know, my dad's dad was a lawyer, and it was he and my grandma who sat me down when I was in college and said, continue on with school, go to law school, you know, and that changed my life. But it was my mom's parents who we grew up next door to. So my folks bought a house in Malvern in 1970, and my mom's parents bought a house in 1971. So I was born in 70, and we grew up with them like another set of parents. But as I'm sure you experienced, you know, through my teenage years and through my 20s, I was still blessed to have all four of them into my 20s. The care issues started arising. You know, there was, and my dad comes from 11 kids. My mom comes from 2 children. But my mom's sister was in Florida. So a lot of it was on her. And I really saw all that my mom had to do as one caregiver child. And then all the 10 siblings my dad had, the running around they were doing, you know, as the care issues evolved, as the health declined, from the doctors to the dialysis, to the cancer, to the diabetes, to the wheelchairs, I was the one that was getting dragged around, you know, doing all that, watching all that. So as I tell people, I went to law school because of my grandfather, but I became an elder care attorney because of my grandmother. And here I go. So the reality of what we do is from the heart, and that's why we enjoy doing what we do. So your field Julie, to get back to you, your field is the assisted living field. It's helping folks to age and where they age and providing a supportive environment. So please, just for the benefit of our audience, how would you define an assisted living? Where does that fit and how does that work?
So an assisted living is a community where people come to benefit by living with other people in a congregate environment, where your friends are right next door, where everything you need is all right in one place, where you get the supports for the things that might start to become more difficult for you to do as you get older, right? Preparing meals, housekeeping, laundry, solves the problem of the social isolation. So everything you need in an assisted living is right in one place. So that's really the benefits of, the main benefit of living in a community like an assisted living. It is different than a nursing home in that it is not a medical environment. I'm from the Bristol Assisted Living, so if anybody has ever been to any of our communities, they know that they're beautiful. It's like walking into a luxury hotel. It's not a clinical setting. Doesn't look like a hospital. Residents have their own apartment. We do have nursing in many of our built communities, 24 hours around the clock, but they're there to provide assistance activities of daily living, like showering assistance, dressing assistance, medication management. Not necessarily there to provide medical oversight, if you will. So we don't have, physicians on staff, and it's not a clinical setting. Assisted living is different than independent living. That's another trend that's happening these days. Independent living is more of sort of like living on a cruise, right? Where you have all the amenities, the benefits of the social interaction of living with your peers, the benefits of meals and activities, but you don't have that wellness piece. You don't have those nurses, those home health aides, or the case management piece of it. So it's not quite as much supervision or structure.
So that's not even available. Whereas in the assisted living, you can live as independently as you want, but you have the ability to receive that help if needed.
Correct. Although a lot of independent senior living communities do have on-site home care. So there's it could be a tough continuum to navigate for families.
Got it. Okay, got it. So my folks are in their 70s. I got aunts and uncles, like I said, that are late 70s. I think might be hitting 80 at this point. When and I've talked to some of them about different communities and so forth, mostly upstate. When should an adult consider moving? When should they look at this issue of, am I going to stay here? Am I going to the kids? Am I going to assisted living? When should they have that conversation, and what's that thought process like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think with any kind of a move or any major change in life, there's never that perfect answer. Although there are some things that might start to happen in an individual's life that might be signs that assisted living, is a good option for you. As you get older, if you are no longer able to drive, or driving becomes more difficult, assisted living could be a good option for you, because everything you're going to need is going to be right in one place for you, including your visiting doctor. Perhaps you have some kind of cognitive decline. We can't really have this conversation about navigating your second half without really talking about dementia and Alzheimer's. We know that the population is living longer, and we also know that age is the biggest risk factor for dementia. And when you're 85 years old, the statistics show that you have a 1 in 2 chance of having some kind of memory impairment. So we can't really have the conversation about navigating a second half if we don't talk about dementia or Alzheimer's or memory loss. So that might be a reason where it's no longer safe for somebody to be home alone, or maybe managing the day-to-day is becoming a little bit more difficult because of a cognitive decline. You might have somebody who's lonely. Maybe the spouse has passed away and now they're living in a big house, and as you get older, not only are you getting older, but your friends are getting older, and it's harder for your friends to get around, and your friends might no longer be driving. So, um, this is sort of a built-in support system when you live
Right.
in a building with all your peers.
Mhm.
Maybe the house is no longer safe. The homes that were built 50 years ago that our parents purchased, laundry in the basement, stoops leading up to the front door, doorways that aren't wide enough to accommodate walkers. So
Small
it might be that the
bathrooms.
house is
Yeah.
no longer a safe place. Maybe it's just becoming too much for the family to manage, making sure
Mhm.
mom gets 3 meals a day, making sure mom gets to her doctor's appointment, making
Mhm.
sure all the bills are paid. Is the house safe? This is a full-time job for who can be a very
Mhm.
busy working adult child. So
Right.
that might be a reason to move. Maybe there's a history of falls, right?
Right.
We want to make sure
Mhm.
that we create a safe environment. Maybe
Mhm.
poor nutrition and dehydration. That's another reason why a lot of people call us.
Mhm.
I've spoken to many families and make that first phone call and they're like, mom's in the hospital, she was dehydrated, or mom mixed up her medications, right?
Right.
Medications. I mean, I know personally, I take a few medications and it can be tough sometimes when things are going to get refilled and the
Mhm.
dosages change and the
Mhm.
color of the medication changes depending on the generic. So that might be a reason why families start to think that, hey, maybe this isn't safe for mom to be doing this by herself anymore.
Right.
Or maybe just an overall poor quality of life. Mom might be depressed. She's lonely. She's having a harder time just kind of navigating the day to day. It's harder for her to get to the senior center. So those might be some reasons for families to start thinking that
Mhm.
maybe the home isn't the best situation.
Right.
I always encourage people to educate yourself on what options are available before the crisis happens, right? So um, maybe explore what assisted living might look like for your family because,
Mhm.
there's a lot of assisted livings out there and we're all a little bit different. The
Mhm.
care that is provided, our staffing patterns, the price points, the aesthetics, and it could be just another thing for families to have to deal with if a crisis happens. So don't be afraid. Assisted living,
Right.
we're usually pretty nice people. And we love to show our communities. We love to have people come in and see what
Mhm.
it can be about. And very often people are surprised when they come into our communities and see how beautiful they are and see how active the residents are and see how good the food is and the kinds of high quality care that our residents are getting.
Great.
So those are some of the reasons why some people might
Absolutely.
start looking.
Absolutely right. So it could be social issues, it could be care issues, it could be family issues, it could be change of scenario issues. Um, so in all of those folks, is there a who is assisted living a good option for? So the scenario or the question we're just dealing with is different scenarios, but who
Mhm.
is that? What's the typical resident or person looking into this type of an environment, this type of a change? Who would that be?
So I think it's easy to understand it if we kind of break it down into three main categories.
Got it.
So we have residents that choose to move to the Bristol Assisted Living
Mhm.
because they're just of advanced age and things are
Mhm.
starting to get a little bit more difficult. They're relatively independent. They might still be driving.
Right.
We've had residents who moved into our communities who are still working, but they don't want to live in a home by themselves anymore. They like
Mhm.
the idea of being around their peers. They like the idea of having a movie theater right downstairs. They like the idea of having 3 meals a day cooked for them,
Mhm.
housekeeping done for them, their laundry done for them, and being around other people. So
Sounds good to me.
yeah, exactly. So they choose to move to a Bristol to be sort of be proactive and to just live a great quality of life in a beautiful setting. We
Good.
have the other category of people are people who might need some help with activities of daily living. They don't
Mhm.
necessarily need an aid with them all the time,
Right.
but they have arthritis and they need some help getting out of bed in the morning, or they're a little unsteady and so they need standby showering assistance. Or, like
Mm.
I said, they are on medications and that's becoming too difficult for them to manage. So they're still pretty independent. Maybe there's a little bit of memory loss, or maybe there's some physical decline. And we're there, right there, 24/7 to be able to support you so that you can stay as independent as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And then the third category of people are those people we were talking about before who have significant memory loss.
Mm.
who really need more supervision, more support, more structure. Within each of our Bristol communities, we have what we call a secured memory neighborhood, Reflections, which is a neighborhood within the community, if you will, that provides a smaller, more structured, more supportive environment with staff that are specially trained in dementia care, communication skills, understanding how to properly care for people with cognitive decline. And it's, like I said, secured. People say it's a locked unit, but that's basically what it is. It's for folks that don't have the capacity any longer to know not to walk out that front door, or just need a little bit more encouragement, or sort of an easier neighborhood to navigate rather than the larger assisted living. So those are sort of the three categories of people that could benefit from moving to a community like the Bristol. Those folks that are independent, that are looking for the lifestyle, those
Right.
people who need a little bit of physical assistance or possibly medication management, and then those people with, cognitive decline who really need the supervision and support.
That's great, Julie. That's a very succinct and understandable way to kind of break it down. So I'm glad you did that. So if an individual or a couple or a family decide that this is something they want to pursue, um, how do they pay for it? I mean, what are they looking at? Obviously, if they're living in their home, they have expenses, or if they move to an assisted living, there's going to be expenses. So how do they pay for all that?
So we can certainly provide you with a chart that we have that kind of helps you break down what your current expenses are compared to what it might cost to move to one of our communities. But at the Bristol, and people sort of know us as a Long Island based community. We have 15 now on Long Island, others in the New York metropolitan area, and there's other providers that do similar to what we do at the Bristol.
Mhm.
But the vast majority of people who are moving into the Bristol are people who are paying privately. So what does that mean? That means people who have pensions that they're using to help fund their monthly rent, or they have a home that they can sell now because they're not living in the home anymore, and they're using the profits to be able to afford this wonderful lifestyle. So savings, pension, those kinds of things. There is a small benefit through the Veterans Administration, which I'm sure you know of, the aid and attendance program that can, under certain circumstances, help to supplement the cost of assisted living if the person needs any care. There are some income and asset requirements for that benefit, but for anyone who is a veteran or the spouse of a veteran, that is something we always encourage families to explore to see if that might be an option to help support the cost of assisted living. Long-term care insurance. So not all long-term care insurance policies will pay for the cost of assisted living, but many of them will. And we have to just take a look at the policy and see how it's written, and make sure it's not a home care only policy or a nursing home only policy. But most of them will also pay for the cost of assisted living, as long as you require assistance with at least 2 or 3 activities of daily living, or have a cognitive impairment. And we have a good percentage of our residents that do have long-term care insurance policies. The folks that we see, our average age being in the mid to upper 80s, are folks that purchased these policies many, many years ago. So they tend to be fairly generous. We're always happy to take a look at the policy for them to, make sure that it's to see if it would be covered. And then there are some assisted living communities that do accept Medicaid. There are a handful of them on Long Island. The Bristol is not one of them, unfortunately, except for our community in Lynbrook. And I say that because, the reimbursement that we're getting from Medicaid, clearly is lower than what we get for the level of service and luxury and care that we're providing at our communities. But there are certainly good providers out there, that including the Bristol in Lynbrook, that has a limited number, not the whole building, but a limited number of beds for folks that are on Medicaid. We have a waiting list right now, but for somebody who has a couple of years worth of assets, that might be a good option for them.
Good, thank you. When I'm talking to clients, potential clients, and families, I always break down. There's three ways to pay for care. You're using your private money, or using long-term care insurance, or using Medicaid, and that's basically what you just shared. And the good thing about this is this isn't even care yet. It's really just a nice residential community option. So let's talk about next the last year. Okay, so 2020 into 2021 has been a doozy for many families. It's it affected our seniors greatly. You have many families and children are concerned about communities and communal environments after the pandemic. So how has it changed where, Bristol, and how is it safe, and is it time that they can start looking again at these options?
I'm really glad we're having this conversation. So let's just start with, we know that assisted living communities throughout, we're not immune to this virus. Clearly, our residents are the most vulnerable to this, to poor outcomes related to this virus. But I can tell you that we have an incredible team at the Bristol. And from day one, the leadership took the initiative to ensure the safety, the well-being of our residents. Whether it was having appropriate PPE, and we needed to quarantine residents because those were the regulations that were coming down from the state, fast and furious, changing hour to hour sometimes and conflicting with each other at times. But the state was doing what they needed to do to keep New York residents safe, and we were doing what we needed to do to keep our residents safe. And it really changed every aspect of how we operate, and continues to change every aspect. Things are certainly different now than they were a year ago. The vast majority of our residents have received the vaccine, most of our staff as well. And the numbers in general, thanks to everyone else, the numbers are coming down. And so we're thankful that little by little, life is getting back to what is probably going to be the new normal, but pretty close to where we were. When it comes to congregate dining, for a very long time, residents were eating in their apartments, but now our dining rooms are open again. Fewer people in the dining room at any given time, plexiglass dividers, but they're still getting that Bristol dining experience, right? The way that we run activities, the days of 50 people in the bistro listening to entertainment, we're going to get there. The state still does have restrictions on how many people we can have, and the masking and things like that. So we're continuing to navigate that. Even housekeeping, or the way that we maintain the buildings, our air filtration system, our elevators, everything that we do in assisted living was affected by the virus and needed to be modified in some way to keep the population safe. And particularly for those people with dementia, when you have Alzheimer's, it's hard to reason with somebody to keep a mask over your nose. It's hard to stop them from wanting to hold hands with their friends. They don't have the ability to reason, and in addition to that, to communicate possibly how they're feeling. So the most vulnerable are the people that we were tasked to care for, and our staff came to work every day, even though they might have been fearful of getting the virus themselves and bringing it home to their families. But they were dedicated and caring, and they continued to be. And we're just grateful for everyone's support. And we are certainly in a different place than where we were. And many of our communities fared very well. Limited number of active cases. Very often the early cases that were in our communities actually came to us from residents that were coming back to us from rehab. This is back in March, before testing was available, before masking was required. So we were kind of behind the eight ball in many cases. but we rose to the occasion and really came out, I feel, the leader in the industry in terms of how we managed and handled the challenges of the virus. And we're just really just so excited for our residents now that can leave our communities and visit with their families and come back. And we're able to have, our dining rooms open again and activities again and visitation again. And like I said, little by little, we're really hopeful and positive for the future, and things are starting to get back to normal for our amazing residents and our fantastic staff.
Good. That's encouraging. I'm glad Bristol's taking all those steps, and so it sounds like you're saying it's time and it's safe. People can start looking at this option. Good to know. So folks, children, seniors listening to you today, how can they decide? Where do they start figuring out whether the Bristol's right for them? How do they make those choices?
So that's a really good question. People don't usually just wake up one morning and say, hey, I think I'm going to call the assisted living today and find out a little bit more. Usually something has happened, right? They're starting to notice maybe a decline in mom, whether it's physically or cognitively, or maybe dad passed away and now mom's home alone in the house. Usually something has happened. And so it really starts with a phone call. When you call us, we have a lot of questions for you. So, be prepared for us to just really want to understand what's happening in your family's life right now that is making, made you make this phone call. And because we really want to try to, find a solution for you. And listen, we know that assisted living might not be right for everyone. There's a lot of factors that go into a family making a decision. Is it, and I joke sometimes and say, nobody does cartwheels into assisted living, right? There's the biggest resistance is parent resistance, right? That's the biggest barrier to people moving in. Because I think communities like ours didn't exist even 20 years ago. The Bristol is only a 21-year-old company. And so it's hard to imagine for folks who are in their 80s to imagine what an assisted living could look like, right? Because the only thing they have to compare it to is the old age home, right? From 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so, and then this idea of, we promised dad we would keep mom in the house, or mom, we promised mom we would keep her at home. Well, that was maybe before you knew what the options were, before you knew that communities like the Bristol even existed. So it's a different way of thinking for families, but really having a conversation. And listen, we have, even amongst the Bristol, there's different price points, there's different care levels, there's different licensing. So it can be a little overwhelming for families. But me and my colleagues, we are here to support you. So if you're thinking about the Bristol, you're certainly welcome to have a conversation with me first. And then based on maybe what your care needs are, or where your family lives, or I don't know, maybe you're a veteran, you're looking for a building that has a lot of vets. We have buildings that have that too. So I'm always happy to be that point person for any of your clients. But if you choose to call one of our communities, we're a pretty friendly bunch, and we really just want to get to know you and find a solution to some of your challenges.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned and I probably hear it a couple times a month that, mom made me promise to never, and it's always put her in a nursing home. It's not put her in assisted living, because when that conversation happened or that state of mind was there, it was either home or nursing home. There was no middle ground. And it's a pretty solid, comfortable, sociable middle ground. So Julie, this has been great. This has been great. Thank you. As I was talking to you and you're sharing all this, there was an uncle of mine, my dad's oldest brother, my oldest living brother at this point. He had shared him and his wife upstate, where we're looking at different communities. And he goes, Brian, your Aunt Kathleen and I, we want to be going towards something versus running away from something. So they didn't want to have to leave the house. Instead, they wanted to, while they were still able and comfortable and able to socialize and do all the activities, they wanted to go towards something. that was exciting and able to welcome them in and for them to enjoy their time. So that to me is what Bristol is, and I think you conveyed that really well. So thank you again for being our first guest on Navigating Your Second Half. If somebody does wish to talk to you, what's the best way? Is it a phone? Is it an email?
Always, you can call me. My cell number, 631-926-8864. Or you could call any of the helpful people in your office, I'm sure. And
Of course,
you're welcome
we
to
can
give
direct
away
them to
my
Julie.
phone number and my email
got it.
address.
Wonderful. Let's see if we have any questions. All right. So one moment, Julie. Let me check our box here. Dun, dun, dun. So here we go. You mentioned that a majority of the residents are private pay. Would a private pay patient be transferred to another assisted living facility if they turn around and become Medicaid eligible after a few months? Also, how does one rank the quality of assisted living facility? All right, so let's do one question at a time. So if a person is paying privately, how does that work as their funds start to dwindle, if that happens?
Right. So we don't do a financial background check to determine that somebody can afford to live in our communities.
Right.
We really rely, we leave it up to the family and their trusted advisors, such as yourself,
Yeah.
Brian, to, figure out how long can they pay for care. We're very open and honest about what our rent is, what the care charges are, what the potential rent increases might be over time. And so, in this conversation, our average stay nationally in assisted living is between 2.5 and 3 years.
Great.
That's not to say that we don't have residents that live in our communities for much longer than that.
Yeah.
But typically that's how long. So I would say if a family has 2 to 3 years worth of resources, you're in pretty good shape. If you were to become Medicaid eligible, and I'm assuming that would mean because you're working with a trusted estate planner who is helping you do that. You could move. You could go to an assisted living that takes Medicaid. It's going to be a little different than a private pay Bristol. So if you're accustomed to a certain lifestyle and aesthetic and food quality and activities, it really just depends on what is going to be a good fit for you.
Right. And as we tell people and clients all the time, you want to generally minimize transitions. You don't want mom to move 4 times. So analyze the situation, talk to people like Julie, talk to people like myself, and talk to mom, or dad. It comes down to a team of advisors, and wisdom is in numbers, right? So you try to figure out if it's the right decision. Another question, Julie, is like nursing homes have a Medicare ranking, or grading, or does assisted living have anything like that?
So we are licensed by the New York State Department of Health. And so you can go on to the Department of Health website and we get, an evaluation from the Department of Health every 18 months, I believe it is. And so you could see if there's any, violations and things like that, for not only for the Bristol, but other assisted living providers. I don't believe there's a ranking.
Yeah, I don't know the ranking like that.
That doesn't exist. But we really encourage people to visit. That's really going to be, because I have to tell you, even amongst the Bristol, every community is different. The makeup of the population is different. The kinds of activities we do might be a little bit different. The feel might be a little bit different. And so even, you might, even though there's 15 of us on Long Island, you walk into every Bristol, it's going to be a little bit different. So it might take a little time. I always also suggest to families, don't take mom for those first visits. And the reason for that is that you might walk into an assisted living with a very frail population. Maybe mom is pretty independent, maybe a little cognitive decline, but she's still pretty good. And you walk into an assisted living with a very frail population with lots of people in wheelchairs, getting very high levels of care, the conversation's over, right? So now she's gotten turned off. So my suggestion is to go visit communities on your own first. It could also be very overwhelming, right? Which one's got the pool, which one had the bigger apartment, which one had, right? So visit first what ones that are going to work for you geographically, because you always want to have mom convenient and close by. You're going to move her, you might as well move her close to where you're going to be if you can. And then pick your favorites, and then give mom a choice, A or B.
There you go.
So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, and it's not to be secretive or anything like that. It's just to help mom with the decision-making process.
Exactly.
So I agree with that.
Yeah.
Another question is, are there social workers on staff at the facilities?
So each one of our communities is staffed with what we call the resident relations director. It's a case manager. That position is typically either a social worker or a nurse. Mm-hmm. But they're really responsible for sort of the general welfare and functioning of our resident, to make sure that when they move in, that they're acclimating, that they're making friends, and sort of the big picture person to help navigate their second half within the Bristol community. So there can be a social worker. Not every building's going to have a social worker, but if there's that case manager position that kind of acts as the social worker.
Got it. And last question, do you have a short list of the different activities that are available?
There is no short list of activities out in Bristol.
It's a long list?
It is a long list. You can expect on our daily calendar anything from discussion groups, arts and crafts, entertainment, exercise, movies. I mean, the list is on and on. Residents have a say in the kinds of activities that we put together for them. We have parties, birthday parties, outdoor activities, indoor activities. Wow. We have an amazing recreation team that is so creative. We have so much fun. And that's really what it's about. It's about enjoying yourself, about being around other people, about staying as active physically, cognitively, and also even being able to have religious services, whether you need that trip to church or you're looking for Shabbat services on Friday afternoon. Like, that is all what we're there to take care of for you.
Wonderful. That's great. Julie, again, thank you. It's been a great pleasure having you on Navigating Your Second Half. And again, if there's any questions for Julie, feel free to reach out to her or shoot me an email. I have my information here if anybody wants it. So here we go.
I can put my information in the chat.
In the chat? Good. Yeah. There we go. We're skipping through our last things here. And there you go. So the office number here is 424-2800, 631-424-2800. Julie is putting the number in the chat. And the email directly, brian@tullyelderlaw.com. If there's any questions about what we do or what Julie does and her communities do, please feel free to reach out directly. And you just put it in there, Joel?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. All right, everybody. Again, thank you. And please keep an eye out. Next month, there's 5 Wednesdays. So we do not have a webinar next Wednesday, the 2nd, but we will be back on Wednesday, the 9th for our next webinar. Please keep an eye out for emails or check our events calendar on the website, tullyelderlaw.com. Again, Julie, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. All right, be well.
Thank you, Brian. Have a great day, everybody.